We knew them, the humans. They were our embarrassing cousins, our incapable undesirables. That's what we thought. No doubt human pirates and soldiers alike were being mocked and spat on, even these years after the war, in 100 ports and 100 star systems. In the very same moment, we saw our first decrypted BossScribbler video relay. It was the feed from one of the biggest theaters of the war. Our first clue that all would not be as it appeared was that the timestamp was too early, by 10 days. The video came on, and UPC Intelligence and Command watched through BossScribbler's eyes for the first time. It wasn't much. It was a security cam at a BossScribbler hangar. A dozen BossScribbler destroyers were nearing completion. Suddenly, there was a flurry of panicked activity as construction teams fled the ships. A ship blitzed by and torched every destroyer, raining hell from a passing lightning bolt. The feed died. It had been 15 seconds of video, and it definitely wasn't possible to make out the ship that had done the bombing raid. It matched no UPC combat reports. The second video was when the truth began to come to light. This was a destroyer surveillance array. It was chasing a ship, visible only as a spot of white light, as its thrusters dominated the footprint of the ship on screen. The destroyer was unleashing a withering fire as it chased a smaller ship at non-compliant speeds for an in-atmo dogfight. The ship comm chatter was a garbled, layered mess. But one word was being called out occasionally by every party to the comm link: bloodletter. The destroyer managed to land a square hit that broke shielding on the small vessel, and BossScribbler comm officers repeated the triumphant status report. Target's fusion core ruptured. Shields offline. Energy weapon systems low capacity. FTL drive offline. This bloodletter, it seemed, was one the BossScribbler had managed to terminate. Or so it seemed. Not a minute later, after weathering brutal fire without shields, the ship pulled up sharply, as if to escape and flee the planet. The destroyer gave chase. And just when both ships were blistering through the atmosphere, perpendicular to gravity, something was jettisoned from the small ship. BossScribbler comms chattered about it passively, assuming the ship was getting rid of weight. By the time the alarm was sounded, when they realized what it was too late. The last report before the feed died was this. Jettisoned cargo identified as terminal fusion core. Pull away. Repeat. Jettisoned cargo is. The bloodletter vessel jettisoned its own core. It wasn't exactly a nuclear weapon, but there was definitely a lot of unstable energy looking for a way out. The bloodletter ship engaged its thrusters on reserve energy to spin on its axis. When it had turned around completely, it fired just one low-power blast and righted itself to its forward-facing position and kept flying. The bolt of energy pierced the core, which must have been bootstrapped with a small explosive, and the core exploded just meters from the BossScribbler destroyer. The feed terminated. In the brief moment where the ship had spun around, one clear profile shot came into view. The ship was human. As video was decrypted, parsed out, and colorized over the coming months, humans humiliated us one last time. But this time, it was not because we were ashamed. Nor because we were sweeping the primitive race under the rug in embarrassment. No, this time, it was because 193 ships, now known to have been about 90% of humanity's combat-capable interstellar ships, were there, spread out through the theater of war, making savage daring strikes on strategic targets at every major BossScribbler stronghold, with no backup since we had denied them squadron support. In many cases, they struck alone before the UPC fleet even showed up, picking off production centers, supply chains and caches, communication relays, and sometimes even performing impossible strikes against BossScribbler flagships in ships pieced together from junk and held together with twine and prayer. Then the UPC would sweep in and play at war, never realizing how much easier their jobs had been made for them. Bloodletter wasn't code for priority targets. Bloodletter was the name given to an unknown race of wartime geniuses, to suicidal daredevils, to the species who could shake off the fatal wounds of war with only brief recovery periods. The bloodletters were the soldiers, silently picking off Brosk cruisers so that UPC ships could escape unfavorable engagements. The bloodletters were the ones putting boots on the ground and unpowering planetary defenses. The bloodletters were the pirates who boarded enemy flagships and jettisoned Brosk commanders before jamming comms, setting course to blow, and fleeing the scene before the UPC warped in for war. The bloodletters were the ones gift-wrapping supply ships, full of fuel and medical supplies, for UPC boarding parties. The bloodletters were the ones liberating Brosk slave ships, decimating the Brosk fighting numbers. The bloodletters were the ones who took the Brosk capital. The bloodletters were the ones who forced Brosk command to issue their surrender, holding a gun to the back of the Brosk tyrant as he broadcast a declaration. The bloodletters were singularly human. The UPC had spent years patting itself on the back for a war well fought. We were slapping medals on the chests of soldiers who'd scraped up the humans' leftovers. We venerated commanders who punched through defensive lines that humans had crippled days prior. We celebrated a job well done and didn't even invite humanity to the table. Humans turned a stone cheek to the mocking and abuse and derision of soldiers, traders, politicians, and civilians across the sector. They never collected one bounty. They never demanded one particle of gratitude. They never retaliated. Not one pirate stepped forward to take credit. When the truth was out, UPC representatives visited the human capital world to offer a public declaration of recognition and a substantial gift in gratitude. A monument had been erected there in the capital by human artists. It was the 3 sterilized worlds that had suffered before anyone could respond to the threat, each carried and cradled by angels, human myths, guardians of the souls of the dead. A message was written there, an epitaph for 3 worlds to whom humanity owed nothing. Grant them rest, we will erect a sword of fire to guard the resting place. They politely but firmly turned away the representatives and the gift. We knew them now, finally. They were pirates. They were cunning. They were thieves. They were a bickering, inefficient, violent people. And they honorably, selflessly spared countless people on both sides of the war from the fire. Author's name and the link to original text is in the description. Consider tapping the thumbs up and pressing the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video.